Okay, we're live in like 10 seconds.
Okay.
Inshallah. Okay, we're live.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Inshallah, today we'll start our second session on the topic of al-qarina, or the indicators that are used for understanding the Hukum Sharii, whether it carries the certainty or whether it's jazim or ghair jazim. And the third thing that we will be discussing later on will be whether hukum is istawa, meaning it carries both, being equally, meaning of whether to do or not to do an action. So last week we covered up to number 5, indicator number 5, which was, I have to pull out. Okay, so can you see the slides?
Yes.
If you let me know, please. Okay. So very briefly, I think it would be good to just go back and just visit the ones that we discussed very quickly, just the definitions at least, and then we'll move to number 6. So the first 5 that we discussed last week were a qarina can be, or the indicator that tells us if the hukum is jazim, in the case where whether the action shown to us from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the saying from whether from the Quran and the Sunnah that mentions the punishment in that command, punishment in this dunya or in the akhirah, if the action is not done. In the case of an obligation, in the case of haram, if in the case of obligation, if the action is not done, then there could be a punishment. In the case of haram, if the action is committed, then there could be a punishment either in this dunya or in the akhirah in the text. So that's one way of looking at it. That means that the command that's coming in is certain, is assertive, and it carries an obligation or prohibition. It's a jazm, certain command. Second one that we talked about last week was about if the action or the saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is done in a consistent manner, unless an excuse or permission is given, meaning even if the permission is only showing that in certain cases that you are permitted to do something otherwise. So that's also a sign of jazm or certainty. Then number 3 we discussed was about an action or saying which is constantly done even with the hardship, without any other alternative. So if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam continuously was working to establish the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, and even though he was going through a lot of different hardships, but he did not change his path, because the path that he was on, the method he was using was an obligation from Allah Azza wa Jal. So that entails that any action that was done or saying was done in a constant manner without changing the path, that carries also a jazm or certain indicator of certainty. Number 4 that we discussed was if the command itself is just an explanation of already proven obligatory command. So it's only explaining it, or the subject of it is obligation, or the command is basically for protecting the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. In all these cases, if the hukum, any command is there, that command will become obligatory. Okay. And the first one that we talked about was that there were a couple of questions last week, so I just clarify a little bit again, not too much detail. We have discussed it last week, but if there will be any questions, inshallah, we'll talk about them again. So that's about if there's a command from Allah Azza wa Jal, and that command actually goes along like this, that it gives you some choices, meaning like for example, when Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَإِذَا حُيِيتُمْ بِتَحْيَةٍ فَحَيُّ. So here فَحَيُّ is the command actually, that you return the salam. بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّهَا, meaning better than that was somebody has greeted you with, or the least is you return back what they have said. So because here only two choices were given in the to فَحَيُّ, so when you are greeting back to them, it means that this command of hayyu is an obligation. Now, this obligation can be fulfilled by either of the two choices only. There's no more than that. It's not that you don't do a reply back. No. So these are the only two choices. Hence, the replying back becomes an obligation. Yes, you have a choice in the replying back, which one you choose, a better one or the least one. But the replying or the returning the salam becomes an obligation. It's like, in English, there's expression, if somebody says my way or highway, so it automatically means that you only have two choices. Either you go by my way or, there's no other way. So in that case, actually, you're saying there's only one choice, even though you're giving two choices. In this case, actually, it's more of you are given two choices and you choose only from these two choices. So you don't have any other way to return the salam. Okay, so these are the 5 we discussed last week. And today, inshallah, we'll move to the 6th one. And the 6th one is where this qarina, or the indicator, actually is about hukum, which is, it's a repetition of an action. If this repetition of an action is done in a normal situation, that is actually mamnu', that is forbidden to do. So you cannot do that action in a repetition manner. But when the command comes and asks you to do something which was already it was a forbidden action, then this time that repetition becomes an obligation actually, because it is exception to the case in this case, if you want to call it. So like in the case of the example is in the case of Salatul Khusuf, which is the salah that is done during the solar eclipse. And we know that in the solar eclipse salah, for every rak'ah, there are 2 ruku's instead of 1. If a person does 2 ruku' in a regular salah, then it invalidates the salah. While in this case, or it's not allowed to do 2 ruku'. But in this case, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed us to pray the lunar eclipse, solar eclipse salah like that, hence it is away from the norm. So this becomes an obligation. Okay, like the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that mentions that from Aisha radiallahu anha قالت خسفت الشمس على أحد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that there was a solar eclipse in the time of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, فنودي الصلاة جامعة فاجتمع الناس, and then a call was made to for the people to gather. فاجتمع الناس فصلى بهم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم prayed with them 4 ركعات في ركعتين 4 ركعات في ركعتين. So there were 4 ruku'us in 2 rak'ah prayers. So we know that each rak'ah can have only one ruku', while in this case the hadith is saying there were 4 rak'at, meaning there were 4 ruku'us in 2 rak'ahs. Wa 4 sajadat, meaning there were 4 sujood, which is a normal thing that you have 2 sajdas in each rak'ah. So hence this command, which was to do repetition of something extra, that becomes an obligation. Okay. Now the number 7 is this is an easy one, I believe, and inshallah it will be easy to understand, which is if the text itself carries the words that are of the meaning of halal, meaning to make something obligatory or to prohibit something. That is a sign of saying that this is a jazm, this is a command of decisiveness. There's the decisive command in there. Like in the case of the ayah that in regards to inheritance, when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Yusikum Allahu fi awladikum lidhakari mithlu hadd al-unthayayn," meaning talking about Allah commands you to in regards to your children, for the male a portion of equal to that of the 2 of the female. And then the ayah continues on and it says, فَرِيدَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ. So here the word farida is used here. So farida is from the fard or the wajib, you want to call it. So in that case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is ordained by Allah Azza wa Jal. This is a command which is clearly mentioned. This is a fard. It's an obligation. So this is decisive by the word which is used in the text. Similarly, Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah An-Nisa, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ. Here, the word حُرِّمَت is used, and حُرِّمَت means Allah is saying here that it has been forbidden for you. It is haram for you. It's made haram on you, your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your aunts from your father's side, and your aunts from your mother's side. So these are made haram for you. So here, it's not just a command of not to marry your mothers or like this. Rather, the word is used, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ. So there is a specific word, kalima has been used, which carries the meaning of haram. So that from the text, we can tell that it is haram. Similarly, Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالدَّمَ وَلَحْمَ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَمَا أُحِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ. So here, Allah Azza wa Jal says, there are two words are used here. One is harrama alaykum, okay? That Allah has made it haram. He has made it haram on us, on you. Al-mayta, the dead animal, wa-dama wa-lahm al-khinzir, and the blood and the meat of the swine or the pig. And وَمَا أُهِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ, and on which the name of Allah, or other than Allah, has been taken while they're sacrificing an animal. So here the word is harrama alaykum, from which is the same word for the haram is used also. This is the fi'l of one of the verbs is used. So the word is telling us that this is haram. Or the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when it says, لا يحل امرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر أن تسافر ميسرة يوم وليلة ليس معها حرمة. Here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that لا يحل لامرأة. So it is not permissible. So this is from the halal is from the same root word. So it is not halal for you, for a woman who believes in Allah and is in the day of judgment, to travel the distance of one day and one night, 24-hour or longer distance, without the mahram, unless she has the mahram with her. So that here la yahillu li'imratin, the yahillu carries the meaning of, or the indicator that this hukum is an obligation. Okay, so that's number 7. Number 8 indicator is about this is the action. The action is described with some description that indicates decisive prohibition, such as, so it carries like a loathing from Allah Azza wa Jal, or a slander, or vilifying the action, actually, if you want to call it. Because dham means vilification of an action, or a heinous description, such as fahisha, or immorality, or the work of shaitan, and denial of faith, or meaning the denial of iman, or denial of Islam. These kind of expressions, if they are used in the ayat or the hadith, they carry also whatever hukum is attached with it, that carries prohibition as well. Now, for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا مَا نَكَحَ آبَاؤُكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَمَقْتًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. So here 3 words are used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited a man to marry a woman to whom his fathers, whether father or grandfather, married a woman, except whatever happened before the hukum was revealed. Allah is saying that this is innahu kana fahisha. This is immorality. Wa maqtan means it is a hateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sabila, and it's a evil way. So see, there are 3 different words are used which are indicators, all of them, each one of its own is an indicator that this is a prohibited action, meaning وَلَا تَنْكِحُ, do not marry, carries a decisiveness in there because it is attached to fahisha wa maqtan wa sa'a sabila. Okay. Other thing is when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, lima taquluna ma la taf'alun, that, oh, you who believe, why do you do something that you do not, why do you say something that you don't do? كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقول ما لا تفعلون. That, and this is a great, this is something very, this is great is the hatred by Allah Azza wa Jal, for that you say something that you don't do. And there are many ahadith on the same subject as well, about not to say things that you don't do, basically. And here the indicator in this ayah is the word maqtan. So maqtan, which is used here, it carries that this is a great hatred in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hence it is haram for us to say things that we don't do. Okay. Now, on the same subject of loathing from Allah Azza wa Jal for an action, or vilification of an action, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing that this is something which, or the denial of the iman, or believing Allah, or believing in Islam. These are the things that also actions of shaitan. These are the signs that these ayat or ahadith carries the command of prohibition. Like Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, innama al-khamru wal-maysaru wal-ansab wal-azlamu rijsum min a'mali shaitan. So here, the word which is used here is rijsum min a'mali shaitan. That Allah is saying, oh, you who believe, that indeed, and the khamr is any kind of intoxicant, or maysaru wal-ansab wal-azlam, and they used to use, for example, so some stones and altars for sacrificing the things for other than Allah Azza wa Jal. And they used to do that, like from the arrows, they used to find that they should do an action or not to do an action. So these kind of things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually linked it to that, even though that there's no hukum here mentioned like this. It's not saying, in this, actually, at the end it's saying actually, that in the beginning Allah is just saying that these are the actions of rijsum min a'mal shaitan, that from the work of shaitan, or defilement from the work of shaitan. And Allah is saying fajtanibu, and stay away from it, avoid it, لعلكم تفلحون, so you may be successful. I mean, there are other qara'in that talks about لعلكم تفلحون, the action, meaning if staying away from it can cause you to be successful in the akhirah. That can also carry the meaning of an obligation as well. Similarly, when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in Surah Al-Imran, لا يتخذ المؤمنين الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء. Here Allah Azza wa Jal is prohibiting that let not believers to take disbelievers as their allies. So it is not allowed for the Muslims to have the kuffar to be as their allies. Unfortunately, it has been taken very easily nowadays, whether we talk about, we find out how Emirat is United Arab Emirat, when they just sign all sorts of peace treaties with the Zionist state, and they are calling for peace with the Zionist oppressive state, and they're recognizing that illegitimate state, and becoming taking them as their allies. So this is not allowed in Islam. لا يتخذ المؤمنين مؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين. That the believers let not believers take them as their allies. And then this is connected with وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. That whosoever does it, okay, then he will not have anything from Allah Azza wa Jal. So if a person is going to be deprived of ajr from Allah Azza wa Jal, meaning this is, you're talking about, this is a destruction for him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about that if he's not going to get anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he is doomed. Similarly, Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in Surah Al-Nahl about the same qarina, man kafara billahi min ba'da imanihi إلا من أكره بقلب مطمئن بالإيمان ولكن من شرح بالكفر صدرا فعليهم غضب من الله ولهم عذاب عظيم. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about that whoever disbelieves in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the belief, meaning he becomes a kafir, except the one, and this is about the ayah was revealed when Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anh, when he, to protect his life, when he saw his family, parents were killed in Mecca by torturing them, and they were forcing him to say some kalimat of kufr. So, and he said it to basically just to save his life. And as we discussed in the past, it is allowed in the case of when you are going to lose your life in those circumstances, it is allowed to say any of those things. But so here, Allah Azza wa Jalla is talking about is that if a person, but in a normal circumstances, if he goes from Islam to kufr, or Iman to kufr, except the people who are forced to do that. And while they are forced, in their heart, they are still secure with the faith. They say with Iman, that their heart is has itminan in it. But those who ولكن من شرح بالكفر صدرا فعليهم غضب من الله. But those who open their hearts to disbelief, meaning they openly accepting the disbelief and they open their hearts for the kufr, then this is connected to غضب من Allah. The anger of Allah is for them, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, and also they will have the great punishment. So here there are actually two different qara'in we can see. One is the very first one that we talked about, if a hukum is connected with punishment from Allah Azza wa Jal on the Day of Judgment or in this dunya, that hukum also carries decisiveness or it is jazm. So here the ghadam min Allah, the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the adabun adim on the Day of Judgment for them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These both of them are indicators that if a person after having iman, if he does the kufr, and of course if he died in that state, then he is he will be having the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. So that carries a decisiveness as well. Okay, so we covered 6, 7, and 8. If there is any question about the first three, inshallah, I will try to answer them first, and otherwise I'll move on to the rest of them. So if there is, sorry I forgot to mention in the beginning, like the last week as well, if there are any questions while I am going through these slides, I'll take a break like after every 10 minutes or so. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them and then move on to the next slides. But if we can always do all the questions and answer at the end as well, is just to make sure that things are clear. Brother Jawad or whoever is moderating, if you can help me if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, inshallah, I requested it. So far, no questions. And the people on the Zoom, they can unmute themselves to ask any question.
Okay. And there's nothing on the YouTube right now, right?
No, nothing. So far, nothing. As I receive them, I will paste them on the chat, okay?
Okay. Okay.
Inshallah.
So let's continue on then. So number 9 is إذا كان طلب مقترنا بالإيمان أو ما يقوم بمقامه. So if when a command is associated with iman or something that takes its place. Number 9 is إذا كان طلب مقترنا بالإيمان أو ما يقوم. Okay, this is kind of repetition going on here. I'm hearing it again. So what's the somebody has a question? Number 9 is إذا كان طلب مقترنا بالإيمان.
I know it's delayed.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
Zain has a
salam.
question.
Somebody has a question?
Yes, Zain has a question.
Go ahead.
Go and ask.
Go ahead.
Go and ask. Ask karo.
Seems like you are muted now.
Na karo baat. Ask karo.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, wait, that wasn't me. Okay. Hello? Sorry.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa
Oh,
barakatuh.
yeah. I had a question about like the travel. So if a woman travels like nowadays you can go like around the world or something like that in like less than 24 hours. Would that is it a matter of distance or time?
So the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the time. Okay, so we'll stay with the time because it says "An tusafir maysara yawmin wa layla." So for day and night, that means actually 24-hour distance. One day and one night means here 24 hours. So it's the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. So number 9 is when the command is associated with iman or something that takes its place or the iman. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخرة وذكر الله كثيرا. Here it says basically we know this ayah we hear all the time that there is a best example for us in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But mentioning this that there is certainly there's an excellent example in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's connected to لمن كان يرجو الله ويوم الآخرة. The one who has hope is in Allah and the Day of Judgment. So this is about the iman, because the one who has a hope in Allah and the last Day of Judgment means this is something connected to the iman. So since this command is connected to the iman, it means to take him as the example for us. It's not a matter of choice, it's an obligation. It's the decisiveness in there. Similarly, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنْ تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. So here Allah Azza wa Jal is telling the believers that, oh, you who believe, obey Allah and His Messenger and the one who are in authority from among you, meaning the one who are rulers over you, implementing the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah and His Messenger. Not talking about that anybody who's on the authority that you just blindly follow them, and even the one who are implementing the rules of Allah Azza wa Jal, the command is to obey them. And in case you have some disagreement, meaning that if you disagree with them, if you have some sort of a disagreement with or anything, then you return back to Allah and His Messenger. So the decisive factor here is, first of all, whatever decision we're making, we're following Allah and His Messenger. And then it is connected to something that shows that the command which is mentioned here to obey Allah and His Messenger and the ulul amr minkum is an obligation. There's a condition attached to it, but the following Allah and His Messenger and ulul amr minkum is an obligation because it's connected to in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir. If you believe in Allah and the Day of Judgment, because connected to the iman, then it is decisive command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, within that, for ulul amr minkum also is connected فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. That if you disagree with them, what they are bringing in, for example, if a ruler tries to implement kufr laws, then there is no obedience in that case, because the things in which there is disobedience of the Creator, there's no obedience for falling people if it includes the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so that's about something which is the hukum which is connected to iman. Okay, then the number 10 is something which is command is associated with the impermissibility of a permissible action. So if something is permissible by from the Shara in general, and then a hukum comes in and says not to not to perform that permissible action, then in that case, that impermissibility carries decisiveness, meaning it's an obligation for us not to be involved in those actions. Like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Salatul Jum'ah, it says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, idha nudiya li salati min yawm al-jum'ah, fasa'u ila dhikri Allahi wa dharul bay'a, dhalikum khayrun lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, oh, you who believe, when the call for Salatul Jum'ah has been made, then proceed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, is proceed for the dhikr Allah, meaning remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa dharul bay'a, here to leave the bay'a is the trade. Now, we know that trade in Islam is a halal action. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, that Allah is the one who made bay'a as a halal, which is the trade is halal, but Allah has made riba haram. Now here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَدَرُ الْبَيْعَ, to leave the bay'a, leave the trade. So something which was halal, and if Allah is commanding in the specific situation to leave it, then that carries an obligation. That carries decisiveness, because something which was halal in origin, that has been made impermissible here. So that's also another indicator of decisiveness. Okay. Now, number 11 is about an action or the order to voluntarily or give charity, basically. When the origin of this matter is a command, then the request for this principle is a definite request. Let me explain this, because this is a little bit confusing here. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ فَنَذِرَةٍ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and if someone is in hardship, okay, then there will be a postponement, إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to postponement until a time of ease, when some ease has happened to him here. So it's talking about dain here. Somebody is under your debt, and he is insolvent. He's not able to pay you back at that time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding here to give him some time. And then it's followed with وَأَن تَصَدَّقُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And if you actually give up on your loan partially or completely, meaning you forgive him, then in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is better for you. In kuntum ta'lamun. And of course, if you know this, that it is better for you to forgive the loans of the people. Now here, if you think of it, it's kind of again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving two options here. It can fit into that category as well, or it's actually more about Allah is first telling us to give some muhla, some time to the person, that give a person who's under your debt, give him some time. And if you actually forgive some or part of it, all of it, then it is better for you. Now, because that أَن تَصَدَّقُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ came later on, then the easier task, which is to give muhla, it becomes an obligation here actually. Okay, so that's what this qarina is talking about. If you're given the options like this, then the first one becomes a decisive one, that this must be done. So if you have given loan to somebody and the person is not able to pay back, obviously we're talking about really he cannot pay back. He's going through some pinching time, meaning he's he's going through very difficult times. Those are cases. Otherwise, actually, that's another other hukum of if you have to pay debt back and you are not paying the debt back to the person who's supposed to be taking giving the money back, that's haram of its own. And even there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that talks about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a shaheed will enter into Jannah without any kind of accountability except the dain, except the loan that he was supposed to pay. So that's that to pay back the loan, of course, is an obligation of its own. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about from the other side of it, meaning that if a person is not capable of paying, then at least you give him time, and if you forgive him, that is better. So giving him more time is an obligation on the person who has given the loan to somebody else. Okay. Now, the last one about this jazm indicators is a famous qaida, which is that if there's an obligation that cannot be completed, cannot be fulfilled without taking certain steps, then those steps that must be taken to achieve the obligation also become obligatory. Even though those steps that we're talking about are not obligatory of their own, but to fulfill or to accomplish another obligatory job, this has to be done. Then those actions which otherwise are not fard or wajib, they become fard. Okay, so that shows also decisiveness in the hukum. An example is like that. We know that, for example, wudu is not a fard to have. Salah is the fard, meaning the 5 times prayers we have to do, for example, or Salatul Jum'ah needs to be done, or Salatul Janazah needs to be done. So these are salahs which are obligatory salahs. Now, wudu is a shart, meaning wudu is not something that you have to do out of besides the salah. But because a fard cannot be done without a person to be in the state of wudu or ablution, hence that itself carries the command of obligation as well. So those steps which must be taken to achieve another fard also become fard, otherwise the fard cannot be accomplished. So these are the 12 qara'in of jazm that we have covered so far, and inshallah in the next sessions we will talk about the other 2 categories of the qara'in, which is adamul jazm, meaning when the hukum does not carry decisiveness. How do we tell that? Or if the command is there but it carries equal weight, meaning to do or not to do, or the qarina of istawa. So inshallah we'll stop here. If there is any questions or comments on the subject that's covered today, or even in previous sessions, inshallah I would like to answer them if I can. So let me just go back, and inshallah we will cover these other 2 types, which is التي تفيد عدم الجزم, meaning that does not indicate certainty, and al-istiwa, that indicates equality in the action.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Just one simple question. The 12th rule that you explained, you talked about something known as the qaida sharia. What can you explain? Can you elaborate on what is a qaida sharia? What does that mean?
Are you talking about the last one?
Yeah, but yes, the last one, but
okay.
not the rule itself that you explained, that how it is an indicator, but just what does a qaida mean? Because qaida is not by itself a ayah or something, right? So what is a qaida itself? What does qaida mean?
So qaida means actually a principle, or the fundamentals, or the basis of something. And sharia means, of course, the fiqh, or in this case, we're talking about Islam in general. So The al-qaida here, when we talk about here, it means the principle is sometimes it is taken from the linguistics, from the language, or from the reality. Like for example, in this case, which is mentioned here, or any other case, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us to do an action. Now, and now that specific action that we are asked to do, I'm just talking about this qaida. There could be other qawaid as well, but this is one of the specific one that we are discussing here that actually carries certainty here. So in the case of achieving that specific obligation, if we cannot achieve that without doing an action, those actions, then that also carries a obligation. Now, what is the qaida? Qaida means these are principles that are extracted either from the Quran and the Sunnah, or the reality, or from the language. But the purpose at the end is to understand the ahkam.
Jazakallah khair.
An example of that is from the linguistic perspective is, for example, when, if you remember, one of the qarina when we were talking about the hukum of wudu, for example, about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to do the tayammum here, right? So that was linked to an action or saying constantly done except when an excuse or permission is given. So in the case of wudu, for example, right, we know if water is not available, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to do tayammum. But I want to take it back to something here. In the beginning of the ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu idha qumtum ila salati faghsilu wujuhakum. Now, faghsilu wujuhakum, when it says wash your face. Now, you have to know what is face also. Now, the face has to be defined from the reality also. So you go back to the reality of the face, and sometimes you find differences in defining the reality among the fuqaha as well. But that's because of the principles that they are following to understand the reality also. So these are different kind of qawaid that they use, the principles, they stay within those principles to define something. So here, for example, what is a face? Or when it says, وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. So now here, وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ, your hands up to the marafiq. Now it says إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. So what does it mean by إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ? Up to the elbow means, does that mean that you just stop at the elbow, or do you go proceed the elbow? And again, this is they're going to detail of what does it mean by that. And this is again staying within the qawaid of the language, and you can tell that okay, that means is you actually exceed that. Similarly, when it says وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, so that you do the masah of the head, وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ, and then you are saying wash your feet here, إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْن. So now here when it says wash your feet up to the ankles, that's from the linguistic rules or the qawaid of the language that we are saying that the feet have to be washed now. Then you define what is ka'bain, up to what part of the ankles is considered as ka'bain. So these are the qawaid that comes from the language also. So there are different kinds of qawaid, whether it's from the language or from the reality or from the ahkam, also from the Quran Sunnah as well. Okay.
Jazakallah khair.
There's one more question from the YouTube.
Okay, so I have to go here, chat. Were any of these terms used by the Sahaba? So I'm not sure what it means by which term is it the questioner is asking. But in general, I'll try to answer that in a general manner. For example, when we're talking about the qara'in, or when we are talking about fard wajibs, mubah, and haram and makruh. So some of these terms were used, but not like this, as like for example, the categorization was there, like there was a book you will find where Sahaba said, "Oh, these are the haram actions, these are the fard actions, these are sunnah actions," and stuff like that. It was more for them. It was well understood. Later on, there was a need among the fuqaha, among the people, that fuqaha actually categorized that for the ease of the people. So because not everybody was aware of all the linguistic rules, for example, or all the rules of understanding the Quran or the Sunnah. So they don't have all the knowledge of it. So for the ease of the people, this categorization was done. And you will find that it's not only the fiqh. We find many of the things like that in the case of, and I think we did talked about that in the past as well, that for example, in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran was written on different things, like on bones or parchment or leaves and the skin of the animals and tablets and stuff like that. It was not in the form of the Mus'haf. So, but it was later on done. There was a need came up in the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, when many of the Huffaz were martyred in Battle of Yamama. And it was seen as there's a need to preserve the Quran. It's not that the Quran was not already preserved or not written. It was more of a to put it together in one place. And memorization was the main thing anyways at that time. But Rasulullah had the whole Quran written in front of him in his presence while he was making sure that it was written by the people and he was listening back from them after they wrote it. That's a separate discussion, but Quran was written then. And then in the time of Uthman radiallahu anh, we see that it was written. He made 7 copies that included the different ahruf and he spread it out among the Muslimin. And then the need of compilation of the hadith came up. It's not that the hadith were not there, but there was a need came, and because of that need, it was fulfilled. So to make sure that there's no harm happen to the deen. This is why you see that whenever any issue came up for the ummah, the right people who were supposed to do the job, they took care of the job. So the Quran was preserved, the hadith were preserved. Similarly, the language was preserved. Or you find that, and they normally came in batches. So you see all of the, for example, muhaddithin, most of them were in the same era. You see most of the fuqaha were in the same era, whether it's we talk about Imam Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, or it's Sahibain, or Malik. They were in a similar era, so they took care of that as well. So we should similarly, when we talk about these things, that they were taken care by the people who were best at those specific fields. They took care of it. So it's the same way now we should look at Islam today. What is the need for Islam today? Today is Islam has lost the implementation of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the key thing that the ummah should be putting all their efforts. And the purpose that we are studying that so we can understand the deen that we want to implement as well. I hope that it answers the question that you're talking about. So that these the terms are used. Most of the terms are taken from actually from the Quran and the Sunnah, and these are terms again, and it has meaning. So meaning was there already. Okay. Is there any other question, Jawab? Am I connected?
Yes, you are. That was it.
Okay.
No clarification. There is a 15-20 minutes, 20-second lags between us and the YouTube. So
Okay.
So far, nothing.
Oh, okay. So that's why it was kind of a replaying somewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that this is it. We can wrap up, inshallah.
We'll
Jazakallah khair.
stop here then. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam. Jazakallah khair.